Oh God, he's back. Okay. Oh. Hey everybody, welcome back to the CONVO couch. I'm Fiorella Isabel.
I roll and I'm pasta Jardula. You're supposed to introduce Oz. If you're doing me, if you're doing me, you're supposed to introduce Oz. So introduce Ozarella. And that's Ozarella on the ones and twos. Fam? There is none. I don't know if you know this, but I'm a newspaper.
There's a marmot.
Right? And with a lot of talk right now, you know, the way I went in there to that anti-socialist campaign over there, that little panel, people compared me to Castro after saying, wow, you have the veracity of Fidel. And
they did not say that. That is blasphemy.
They did say that, fam. And they said I was better looking, but I don't want to go too much, right? Senate panel approves Finland and Sweden to be in NATO. So therefore, fam, it just proves that we have nothing but more than warmongers in our halls of Congress over there. And there's just more.
Yeah, I forgot to put that in there.
I know.
Yeah.
Biden,
so,
the first lady of Ukraine. That's what else happened, because as a newspaper guy, fam, you catch these things here. Interesting little foreign policy extra today. They have a little Bannon thing over there. First witnesses called in Bannon's contempt trial. What they won't tell you is that nobody who made these accusations took their butt down there. They sent their staffers over there for this little fugazi thing going on. It's just ridiculous. And advisors suggesting Novavax for COVID-19 unvaccinated, fam. COVID cases triple in Europe, fam. It is getting crazy in the COVID world. So weird. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on. It is not a slow news day by any means, fam. And it's just everything over here. And then, of course, there was one more other thing, fam, I wanted to point out in this thing over here. Oh, yeah, here it is. House protects same-sex and interracial marriage. Says it's likely to stall, fam, in the Senate. More team sports distraction today. You know what I'm saying? Maybe the squad will get arrested for a second time after they go out there. You know what I'm saying? Like that, with these new invisible handcuffs they got out there, fam. So who knows? That's it from Newspaper Guy. Newspaper Guy out. Fiorella, on you.
Well, at least people, if this passes the Senate, I mean, this is where we're at. We can't even pass that. But if it does pass, at least people will be able to get married before they're able to pay their rent, right? Mm-hmm. At least there's equality.
Yes.
Between people of the same sex, because I guess you really need the state to confirm that your marriage is valid. I mean, I get the whole tax purpose thing. I really do. But other than that, really, it's just ridiculous. They're not, they hold these issues over people's heads so they continue being distracted. It's not that I don't think it's important that everybody is allowed to marry whoever the hell they want. But of course, that is what they do, fam. And you're right. Exactly. That's what we're going to talk about, guys. We're going to start off with Aoc and Ilhan. Now, we haven't talked about the squad in a while because, frankly, there's a lot more important things happening. RT did not mention them once today, and we had a very busy day today. So much going on. But in the U.S., of course, this is where the focus is, because they're supposed to be the revolutionaries. I can't even say that with a straight face. They're supposed to be the progressives at the least, right? They're supposed to be the ones that are leading the charge, that are bringing down the house, that are, bringing the ruckus is what she said in the beginning. I'm bringing the ruckus. And literally they're doing nothing, none of the sort. But I do want to point out something that I don't think I put it in the folder, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The entire squad and the entire Democratic Party, of course, the usual Marjorie Taylor Greene, and all of these Republicans voted no, but AOC and every Democrat voted to expand NATO. They voted yes to include Finland and Sweden. These two were never supposed to be included in NATO. They were supposed to be neutral because of the closeness with Russia's border. It was part of a deal. Russia sees that as an escalation, and we're going to talk more about Russia. But if Finland and Sweden come in and there's weapons on their border, Russia's going to act, and then that is a cause for concern. Now, nobody's talking about that really, except the same people that always talk about foreign policy. But AOC, of course, saw this opportunity to continue protesting for supposedly abortion rights. Is this action, right? And so let's just go ahead and show the pictures. So here's some pictures. Here's the first tweet. And this was the original video that was put out. Now, this was from Douglas Fair. He said AOC has just been escorted by police from the Supreme Court. So that's where the protest was. So let's go ahead and watch this video, and then we're going to break it down a little bit, okay?
Oh my
Poor AOC, look at her.
The squad is taking one for the team. They're so courageous. Serious? Are you serious?
Yeah.
You can't be. Are you friggin' serious? Every time I see it, I can watch that 10 more times today, fam, and I'm gonna say the same thing again and again and again. Are you serious? I mean, is that where we're at now? Sorry. No, sorry.
Well, so the cops were never that nice when it was a Julian Assange protest, when they were threatening to arrest, or when it was the force the vote.
Yep.
They were like ready to, they were not like that. And of course, when the LAPD arrested Johnny and I for journalism and filming.
The crime of journalism.
They were not nice, actually. They were very forceful, putting us against the wall.
Moved in quickly.
Literally, my wrists were literally so hurt. I had sores, so did Johnny. I mean, they just didn't care. They were
on you
trying
guys.
to take away. They broke some of our equipment.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's really, and that wasn't even a protest. It's not like I was protesting. We were just filming and covering it during the George Floyd protests. And we're still engaged in a class action lawsuit where Johnny is I forget what it's called, but he's one of the main people. And so that is the way police treat you if you're a civilian, essentially, or if you're media, because that day even CNN, I think, got arrested. But that is not how AOC was treated, number one, and we're going to go over why, because guys, it was a PR stunt. It was staged. It's not a real thing. So you guys can see the pictures. Dr. Fishbones really zoomed in on this. So there's AOC. You guys can see where he says he pretended to be arrested and handcuffed. It's the most AOC moment of her career, which it is, because this is what she does. She's done it several times now.
They could have invented real invisible handcuffs and we just can't see it. I heard the Emperor's got new clothes. You can't see them either. So I don't know.
And it's not even about the lack of handcuffs as more as everything else plus that, because some moron yesterday was like, oh, Bernie Sanders wasn't handcuffed when he got arrested. Yeah, dude, but they're literally pushing the guy, and there's a whole plethora of information of him protesting. Like he was saying, oh, it's misogyny because these people hate women.
Oh, really?
How am I supposed to hate women? I'm a woman. I don't.
Sam, do you hate yourself? Do you hate yourself? Let me know, fam.
I mean, sometimes, fam. That's for another stream, But this is just ridiculous what they're claiming, her sycophants, right? So you guys can see in the pictures, her from the side, putting her hands behind her back. Now, do they ask you sometimes put your hands behind your back? Yes. But they usually ask you that so they can either zip tie you or handcuff you. They don't just ask you to put most of the time. Now, you can see her. She is not at all zip tied or handcuffed or anything like that. Okay. So now I believe this is the next one. Oh, yes. So in addition to AOC, because it wouldn't be fair to just pick on her, if Ilhan was doing this too. So she's Ilhan's doing the same thing. Let's just play Ilhan. And in the same way, it's hilarious. She's not even just, this is a joke. This is a joke. This is hilarious. This is where we're at in the United States. We got Biden and these people.
She got up herself and walked away, and then she puts her hands behind her back, and then she goes at the very last second, yeah.
Yeah, nobody is like going after her. I mean, we've seen Pasta. We've been to a lot of these protests. We've seen how cops treat protesters. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but they're not like, oh, hey, you go, just walk over there. I mean, the nicest cops, if you weren't a protester, if you know, when Pasta was like, hey, how you doing, officer, in Beverly Hills, were okay. They were like, oh, hi, sir, blah, 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 because they saw he wasn't a protester. But other than that, like, they're not that amicable when they think you're a threat to the system or you're some sort of opposition. I thought, you know, this is right after Pasta. She talked about January 6th, right? And all of this stuff. It's just hilarious that she's there getting handcuffed or getting pretend handcuffed and putting on this whole just theater. I mean, I think Shauna Bertley or somebody was like, oh, no, that it was Sky Daddy. She was like, she's a true thespian. She's really committing to her role, fam. And I think AOC is giving you a run for her money.
Maybe we can
when it comes to acting
class together. Maybe me and AOC can be acting scenes and stuff like that. You know, do the Meisner drill. Yeah. I am. What they used to say? Those stupid drills. Oh my god.
She's really dedicated to her performance, and so I said, let me pretend to be arrested and handcuffed so everyone can forget I just voted to expand NATO, an essential terrorist CIA organization promoting coups and regime changes. Look over here, because literally she just did that, and all her sycophants are completely ignoring that aspect or saying, well, there's nothing wrong with voting Finland and Sweden. They have the right to their own sovereignty.
Do they really say that?
NATO, they do say that. That's their reasoning.
Ridiculous.
NATO is a terrorist organization. NATO is there to literally expand and overthrow democratically elected leaders and democratic government, actual democratic governments, or at least people-supported governments, put their own puppets in there and continue to expand the war machine, saying that, you know, led by the United States and the UK, obviously. And the United States and the UK have an upper position in this whole thing because they're not the ones that are so as close to Russia as the EU. And the EU is sinking far quicker than anybody else in terms of Europe because of this. So like when you talk about, oh, they have the right to join NATO, NATO is basically a national security apparatus. It's like if you say you hate cops, NATO is like, they're literally ensuring the interests of the 1%. So I don't understand how you can justify NATO's existence or what NATO's doing. But of course, we started calling this out early on. Anybody with a brain and with AOC's history, where she was crying about the kids in cages with the photo shoot, where she was pretending to supporting the union workers for the photo ops, if you guys recall, with the rent situation that Franco caught and Max Blumenthal and all of that. They all have done this. This isn't the first time, guys. We've been pointing them out for a while now. We've been screaming. We are saying these people are fake. They're the fraud squad. They're the squat, as Misty calls them. They're really just there to bring people in to the establishment, bring these progressives into the establishment. They are COINTELPRO, as Cynthia McKinney said, who, by the way, is having an interview with Franco. And so that is their role. That is what they're supposed to do. They're Instagram influencers, like Steve loves to call AOC, and that's exactly what she is. Because guys, look at this. This was so staged. There is Jeremy Slevin, okay, and he says members of Congress, including Ilhan Omar, will be participating in a civil disobedience at the Supreme Court, potentially including arrests shortly after 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. Okay. So, and then CPD Action is live streaming it. Follow along. Who is CPD Action? We're going to go over who that is. And of course, Robbie Receipts comes in, right? Robbie Receipts. He says, here's Representative Ilhan Omar's communications director, because that's who he is, basically confirming that the arrests were a staged publicity stunt, just like we've been saying, coordinated in part with billionaire-funded dark money group Center for Popular Democracy. Okay. That is a fact. That is a fact that there's this billionaire-funded, dark money, Soros funded, and it is Soros backing this event. And of course, when civil disobedience. So what's the point? You're just gonna, you're gonna get arrested as a Congress arrested. They weren't arrested, dude. They weren't arrested. They were escorted, and they made it look like they were arrested. They weren't arrested. And so that's that, fam. And before I let you comment on this, I just want to put Misty's tweet here. PR photos dropped. And you can see, of course, it's on the front page of every mainstream media. Oh, look at the squad. And then the Republicans can go, oh, look at these, blah, blah, blah. But the Republicans are making fun of them. They're like, look, they're pretending to get arrested. And it just increases that sort of tit for tat situation. And she said, wonder if they also coordinated with Central Casting. I love how she said that, because I have memories of Central Casting. Let me tell you, Central Casting is huge. And I bet you they could coordinate with Central Casting, because it's fucking hilarious. Like, yeah, this is fam.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to look through this whole thing really quick and try to see if I can find anybody out there talking about the squad. Immediately go to Facebook and start looking for it, whatnot. But I mean, what some people don't understand when they start talking about, oh, it's okay for Finland and Sweden to join NATO. Don't they realize, ma'am, that it's just another step closer to World War III? That we are by doing this, we're instigating and we're poking the bear, the actual bear of a nuclear power, by continuing to put missiles and other weapons on the border. And we've heard what they said. This is a new dawn. This is a new day. The Russian Federation is not going to take this line down. They're going to be way more aggressive. So when you see these countries joining for no reason whatsoever, there's no reason why we need them to join. All we're doing is drawing lines in the sand and let's go. And it is scary, but it's even more scary the fact that a lot of people who continue to praise the squad, and they'll make excuses just to find reasons to justify them being right or okay or good or a positive thing from the squad. And that doesn't fall short of them even pushing tactics that lead us closer to World War III, just because they have this sycophancy of And then they also digress back to and keep, hitting that same lies. Well, fam, it's better than the other side. It's better than the Republican side. We're mitigating damage. We have to support the squad. They are more in line with our values. No, they're not. Look what they're doing, guys. Look what they're doing. They are phony as can be. They will never, ever really fight for you. They are there. They're the new Democrats of the future. That's what they are. And a bunch of shit libs that are phonies bought off and will never be there when we need them most. They won't be there when we need them least. They're never there. That's the song by...
Yeah, I mean... I don't know, fam, but that's their role. They're doing what they were elected to do by the establishment. I mean, that's it. They're not elected or they're not doing anything for the people. Oh, there's only six leftists. No, there's not. There's supposedly 100 people in the Progressive Caucus. They don't do shit either. Yeah, they're voting with neocons. These people are all voting with neoliberals and neocons, and they say they're different. Well, I'm sorry, but I guess foreign policy doesn't matter to you. But as we have been saying on this show for a long time, foreign policy is our domestic policy. And this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, or this war that we are trying to wage with Russia using Ukraine, is really showing that reality. Now, just to finish up that point about this being a staged event, Faux New York Finch said this a while ago, had posted about if you guys remember the incident of this woman, Anna Maria Archilia, who was confronting Senator Jeff Flake in the elevator. This person got $12 million annually for the Center for Popular Democracy from George Soros. And so this is, well, I think that they met that the association gets that much, but this CPD, Center for Democracy, Popular Democracy, is notorious for staging events and for pushing certain things to make things like this. And if you guys do recall that elevator situation, this isn't the first time they've done that. So I just wanted to point that out. And Steve's tweet, somebody said, Blue Check Bet said, caption this photo. Steve said the pretenders. Because that's exactly what they are. They're pretenders. They're pretending to be Congress people, but really we know who they are. We know what they are. We know that they're useless. We just saw, right, AOC's catcalling situation where she just went off on this guy, and the guy was an idiot, right? But at the same time, drawing attention to herself, drawing drama instead of focusing on legislation. I put out a video yesterday sort of going over that. And this last part, before I say a couple things, you guys can see she's trying to fundraise off of this, and so will the rest of them, and so will the rest of Democrats, like they've been doing off of the Roe v. Wade situation. Alexandria was just arrested. They're lying, guys. They're lying. She wasn't arrested. I want to see an arrest report if she was arrested. Let's see. Let's see her little ticket. Let's see. I just want to see. I want to see if she was arrested, because if she's not arrested, you got her communications team and her entire whatever team pushing emails that are lying to the people saying she was arrested. And why are they doing that? Because they want your money. They want people's money. You know what the worst part is? Oh, they don't take corporate money. No, they take your money. They take poor people's money, which pisses me off even more, because I guess, at least the corporate Democrats are like, okay, yeah, we're going to take money from these corporate idiots. But you're literally giving your money to people who say, oh, we don't take corporate money, so we're not corrupt. No, you're just as corrupt. You're just now stealing from poor people and people who are dumb enough to still believe in you after this whole time. We've been telling them. And by the way, I'm mad that Pasta and I took that long that we even supported her, that we fundraised money for her. Because it came up on my phone, these pictures from 2017. Yeah, 2017. And I'm just like, wow. Like, I'm mad at myself for even thinking that there was a possibility this person was honest. And immediately when we started noticing it, we were careful about how we said it, because, these people would come and attack us. And then, of course, there came the point where we were like, okay, who gives a fuck anymore? Because this person is a fraud. This person is a fake. It's just, we had to say it, but it's dishonest at this point. It's actually not even, it's just stupid to really think this person is anything but a fake. And just Pasta, I'm going to hand it to you. But the last thing I want to say is the good thing is they have shown their whole ass. This is an unmasking moment, I think, because I've even seen people who normally don't criticize her be like, okay, this is a lot. And they're doing this on their own. They're completely exposing themselves. And I think, it's late now in the game here, but guys, come on. I don't know what else you need. Yeah. Her votes. This is just, it is so obvious how fraudulent these people are. The fraud squad is right.
You know what? There's not a lot I could say really to add to the whole situation. So I just would like to really quickly read that beautiful little thing that just came up, that little fundraiser. Alexandria was just arrested by the Capitol Police outside the Supreme Court during abortion rights demonstrations. Please pledge a contribution of $3 to abortion access groups right now to show Congress we stand with AOC and hashtag we won't back down. Contribute $3 now. Just hit the button. We already have your.
It's just $3. It's just $3, right? Just $3. Yeah, $3 from one poor person, and here's another and another and another. Oh no, it's 15 because of Bernie. And by the way, I just got to say this too. It's an insult to people who are actually arrested and who have suffered at the hands of police violence, unlawful arrests, who are actually out there in the streets protesting for whatever cause they're protesting, who really actually care about doing shit and making changes. It's an insult to those people when you're literally putting on a Broadway spectacle with cameras and media there. Kim Kardashian is more honest than her. I mean, this is like somebody hiring a paparazzi and saying, take my picture. Literally. I mean, I expected from Hollywood, I expected from celebrities. I'm not supposed to expect it from politicians, right? But I guess politicians are Hollywood. I think Samira Khan said something controversial where she was like, DC is Hollywood for ugly people. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, but what I'm saying is great. Like, I think it's funny that, I mean, they're all actors, right? They're all actors.
Oz, I just put down, I don't know, I think it's appropriate too as well. In slide 21, I don't know if you can do a quick cowboy, but I know we need to see Cori Bush. You tell me, fan, you've been arrested. You've been put in cuffs before. You tell me if you could do this stuff if you got arrested for covering something. This is just hysterical. You know what I'm saying? And she even put down Cori Bush. She even retweeted it out. The Supreme Court will not stop us, even though they arrested us. We won't stop our organizing, agitating, and legislating for justice. We got us. We got us. Where's Jabal Bauman? Why isn't he there? But let's take a look at Cori Bush jumping up and down. You tell me if you can do this if you got arrested. This is just phony.
Was a thing. I thought we wanted to defund the police. Oh no, we're gonna give them money instead. Oh, I thought we were, against war. Oh no, we're gonna continue voting for the Israeli military dome. I thought we were gonna really protest. Oh no, we're gonna use the cops to get us up. And by the way, Pasta, to answer your question, if they were actually congressional leaders getting arrested, they would have to go through the whole procedure. They would have to get booked. They would have to go this. They would at least get a citation of sorts. And they would, they could be potentially lose their job, get in trouble. Okay, imagine if Marjorie Taylor Greene was protesting for gun rights or for the Second Amendment. Do you think these people would be so proud that they were getting arrested? Like, they would look at it differently, right? It's just hilarious that they think that this is real, because this is obviously just complete and total fabrication. If they were really getting arrested, like I said, they could potentially lose their job. They would have to go through the whole process. It's not a thing, guys. It's just hilarious. Oh my God.
Guess what the tweet was before she shared that, her jumping moment, her getting arrested? It was Mark Ruffalo. She retweeted what Mark Ruffalo tweeted. Hey, everyone. It's a picture of her standing and says donate on the thing. Cori Bush is in a tight primary race against a very corporate Democrat. We already have plenty of them, and there's only one Cori Bush fighting for the rest of us. Let's all chip in and send her some funding love. Hey, Mark, why don't you go scratch and send some of your Hulk money? All right, you sell out. And before that too as well. And when you want to talk play Cowboys and Indians, red team, blue team, if you look at her freaking campaign video on her thing, it's just ridiculous. Putting down that they have to pay for the insurrection, the Republicans putting up Marjorie Taylor Greene and Josh Hawley and stuff like that. It's like the ultimate psyop of divide and conquer, putting one people in red team, blue team, and then you get your freaking Hollywood actors coming in and
because it's all Hollywood. They're all putting on an act. And by the way, and guess what?
I was saying maybe Mark Ruffalo helped Corey with that acting over there. Sorry.
Maybe. Yeah, no, but the thing is, the right does the same thing. They fundraise off of these morons, and they're like, "Look, they're faking blah blah blah. But donate to us. We're going to do this and that." That's what America is. I mean, it's just one grift after the other, one performance after the other. That's why we had Donald Trump, and now we have this moron who can't even remember what day it is, where he's at. It's just, we're a running joke, and being outside of it and seeing it, it just really makes me sad for the American people, really. I mean, but also, get your shit together, guys. Get these people out of there. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. The rest of the world, as I said in my short video, is literally out there ousting leaders. They're saying, get the hell out because you're not doing us any favors. What is the U.S. doing? Well, they're protesting for this, or they're like making fun of the fact that, where we're at because they're too poor and they can't deal with the situation. I mean, this is where we're at. And the subway, go look at the New York subway right now. Jesus Christ.
Let's read some Super Rays, fam, and then get on to the next section before our guest. Guys, we're going to do take 2 with Don DeBar today. Hopefully we'll get him in. We worked out the kinks, so we're going to have a fun time with Don DeBar. He's great. And fam's going to tell us what's going on in the Donetsk region and what's going on with Zelensky. I don't know. Maybe he's running low on sniffles. Arthur Carter, thank you for the Super 8 contribution. It's always appreciated on the couch. Hello, Convo Couch. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Arthur Carter. It means the world to us. Thank you so much for helping us out. Also, Rob McMurtry, thank you for the Super 8 contribution. Is always appreciated on the couch. Trey Wright, the CGI in Neil Breen movies are more believable than AOC's Arrested. I don't know what that means. I guess Neil Breen probably makes some awful movies, but even that is probably better than AOC's freaking little performance. And El Brillante, thank you for the Super 8 contribution. It is always
Brillante.
Fam, it's Brillante.
That's Italian.
Okay,
his name is Spanish. It's Brillante.
How do you know it's not Brillante instead of Brillante?
Because it's a Spanish word, fam.
All right, fam. Not everything's Spanish, okay? It's not always about Peru.
What?
It's not always about Peru.
I didn't even mention Peru.
I know. I did. I was just being a donkey. Fam, let's get to the next topic so we can go right into Don DeBar.
Yeah, so this is everybody in RT was like so busy today because Putin's been going around getting deals, getting things done. And then of course, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergey Lavrov, excuse me, has been doing a lot of the same thing, but he recently had an interview earlier, I believe it was today, Russia time, with the head of RT, Margarita. And it was an hour-long interview, and I was reading through the entire thing as much as I could. And also I was reading through the just a few. I was watching through the interview that was translated because it takes a few minutes to get it translated. So one of the points that came out of this, right? Some of the main points that came out of this were the fact that in this interview, Lavrov said that the geographical objective of the special operation has changed. Remember that initially they said they were only going to be going into the Donetsk and the Lugansk People's Republics, freeing them and denazifying Ukraine. So he's saying that's going to change and they're going to expand into a number of territories among them being Kherson, which is a very popular area, where I think that they're going further, they're going next, and they've been expanding out westward, right? Mm-hmm. So that is a big deal because, well, the West is going to go and say, see, we told you Putin wants to expand like Hitler and conquer everything, and he must be stopped. That's just what they're going to say. But it's not necessarily the case. He gave several reasons why. Among the reasons was the fact that the West, particularly the United States and the EU, keep supplying Kiev with weapons. And they said that if the West continues to supply Kiev with long-range weapons, these objectives are going to move even further. So they're saying, we're not going to allow you to continue doing this and continue shelling the Donetsk and Lugansk region, which has largely been under Russian control. And we're going to actually shift our strategy to stop it. And we're not just going to stop with Donetsk and Lugansk because you guys aren't going to stop. So we don't trust anything that you say anymore. We don't trust the word of NATO. We don't trust the word of the West. We don't trust the word of the EU. They violated the Minsk Accords. So this is what we're not going to back down on this. We cannot lose this war, essentially. But the third point he made was that a nuclear war is not on the table. It cannot happen. Russia has repeatedly denied that they want a nuclear war, but there is a protocol to follow. They have like a protocol that says, in case of a nuclear war, this is what you do. But obviously, they don't want that, and they see a nuclear war as the end of everything. They say it's, that's it. We can't allow that to get there. Now,
by the way, really quickly, Sam, did you see that in New York they released a PSA on how to deal with a nuclear blast?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, continue to go on. I just had to point that on because, like, the rhetoric of the Russians is totally different. It's nuclear war, that's it. World's over, right? I mean, that's just basic common
sense. There's fear because they control through fear. Yeah. Just like they did with the pandemic, with the Russiagate, with everything. Everything is through fear. Oh, Trump, fear. Oh, this fear. Like, it's all about fear. Whereas Russia's like, okay, here's what's going on. We're going to give you updates as to every single detail of the weapons we're using, the tactics that are going on right now. This is what's going on. These are how many dead, how many people alive, how many weapons, how many captures, where we're going. They're very transparent about what they're doing in that aspect. I'm not saying that they don't keep things to themselves, because every government does. And that is obviously, the essence of the state always essentially having some sort of corruption. But what I am saying is the United States is the opposite. They hide a lot of things. They do covert operations. They don't inform the public. They just put fear into the public, which is why they released that video, because they want people to fear Russia enough to say, oh, we need to get them before they get us, because that's always been their strategy. Yeah. And it's worked for a long time. It's worked with the neocons. It's worked with people who are just scared of whoever the unknown, right, is at that point. Yeah. So here is a map so you guys can get a better idea. So you see Crimea right there. This is Ukraine. Now, Crimea is obviously with Russia. That happened a while ago. And then you can see the Nova Russia. This is new Russia. This is what's been happening thus far. You got Odessa, you got Kherson, you got the Kharkiv, Lugansk, and Donetsk, and the Dnipropetrovsk, something like that. And then you have the green part, which is Ukraine, and it looks like this is what it's going to look like, right? It's not like this yet, but this is what it looks. Where I think
Lavrov was proposing, pretty much right here, that this is the expanded territory.
Well, he wasn't saying flat out. He was saying we're going to go after three of these. He mentioned these three in the center. He mentioned the three in the center. Mm-hmm. These three regions right here in the center, and he said those. But Odessa obviously is one. So it looks like obviously there's Donetsk and Lugansk has already happened. So fully, is it going to be beyond that? Perhaps. I mean, I think Gonzalo was saying
he's in Kharkiv.
It's going to be even further.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's in Kharkiv.
It could be even. Yes, and he was saying it could be even further. There might be only a little bit of Ukraine left, but this is what I think it's going to look like. And I agree with the analysis that it's going to be like half of that is Russia and the other half is mini Ukraine. That's, I think, where Russia is headed. And like I said, the reason they're headed that way isn't because they want to expand and grab every Hungary and Poland and just take over the entirety of Europe, but more so because they want to make sure they have buffer zones. They want to make sure that that NATO can't just go and do this again and try to get on Russia's border like they're trying to do via Sweden and Finland. So that's why they're taking precautions, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, still a quagmire though, fam, right? You know, I mean, this is something that we've talked about. Like, are they going to allow this particular government, when it comes to Zelensky and this regime, or another one like that that's so friendly with the West, to exist right there on the border, even with the new expanded territory? And we have different opinions from different people, where Gonzalo Lira says once the East is solidified, look for a march from the Russian Federation to take the whole rest of Ukraine. They're simply, and then
right,
because they're simply not going to allow to have this type of government again on their border. But people like Scott Horton, from antiwar.com, he says, no, if they do that, forget about that. Now they're even moving closer to Poland and closer to NATO's border. And that's something they don't want to do, even to the point where he said that Putin and the Russian Federation making this move is still not a wise move. We all say it was expected, fam, from what we saw, knowing what happened in 2014, but it definitely seems like a quagmire moving forward, what to do and what can be done. Because, too, as well, from the funding from the West, giving this government those type of weapons, and now up in the ante, it's just worse. Right.
Yeah, they see the West escalating by continuing to do that. And you're right. I tend to agree with Scott on that one. I don't think Russia is going to expand beyond what they feel like they need to expand, because they're looking at it as a buffer zone rather than an attempt to get all of Ukraine. They don't want all of Ukraine. In fact, they didn't even want these parts of Ukraine. These territories have largely demanded and asked for the intervention of Russia, because they have, I think it's a huge percentage of the people in these regions, and particularly the east and the south of Ukraine, are Russian ethnic speaking people. They speak Russian. They are culturally Russian. They align with Russia. They want to be a part of Russia. Nobody is forcing them to do that. There are countless videos that you can watch from our underground journalists that are doing such great work, you can see them being welcomed, the Russian military being welcomed with open arms, saying thank you for coming, blah, blah, blah. So that I don't think is going to be an issue. Obviously, the West is going to say, look how they're expanding, blah, 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 no matter what they do. So it doesn't matter. But I do think if they expand beyond that, then that is going to be looked upon as, okay, now you're really trying to take over all of Ukraine. You may have your reasons, but isn't this a little much? I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to stick to the areas that are primarily full of pro-Russian people. But of course, that may change depending on how much the West and Ukraine, push. Now, a couple of things to get through here. This is some of the things Lavrov said to Margarita regarding the conflict. He said at the beginning of the operation, Ukraine asked to start negotiations, and they approached it honestly. But in Belarus, Ukraine showed that it was not interested in talks. We asked them for a paper with the points we were interested in and provided them with the text of the agreement on April 15th. But nothing has been heard from them since. It's only been heard from Stoltz and other European diplomats that Ukraine must win at the front line because it now has a weak position there. So they must first win at the front, and then it will be possible to talk. Europe deters Ukraine from any constructive steps. There are foreign instructors there. The country is being pumped up with weapons. The Anglo-Saxons really want to make this war a real war. This is the escalation he's talking about here. The British benefit from this. They are sitting across the straits. it is beneficial for Americans because Europe is suffering. Ukrainians will not be allowed to conduct real negotiations until the Americans want it. And that is the bottom line where I do agree with Lavrov here, is that the Americans, the American people, Americans in this sense being the US Americans, yes, these sanctions are hurting Americans. Yes, these sanctions are hurting the British, but they're hurting the European Union way more. They're hurting Germany was so hugely dependent on Russian gas, and everything that's happening is sinking Europe's economy to the point where now the dollar is equal to the euro. So it's a great time for you guys who want to travel to Europe. I got a couple of friends there right now, and they're living the life right now. Because I remember when I went to Europe a few years ago, it was like let's say you got out, you wanted to get out 200 euro. It was like a little bit more than half of that you would get. You know what I mean? So it would cost so much more dollars. So euros were worth a lot more dollars in that sense. So now the economy of Europe is sinking. And so that is a huge thing he's talking about. And the Americans, of course, are driving this situation by continuing to supply Ukraine with weapons. So he's talking about that escalation. And as long as that continues, Russia is going to push back.
Yeah. And I think, fam, that even though, and once again, we talk about sanctions, right? Who they're intended to hurt. They never hit the target, right? This is a situation where, a lot of the sanctions, even though they're really hurting the European Union more than anything, Germany just, cut their nose despite their face. It's ridiculous. A lot of energy now gets moved around, and poor countries, Sri Lanka,
yes,
Pakistan, they suffer as a result of this shuffle that's going on right now. And that's something that's a shame, because we witness this when we go to the global south, how the sanctions hurt the poor more than anything.
Exactly. And the next slide, they talk about Africa. So Africa is one of the continents that has these countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, that are being absolutely just burdened by the shortage of grain and the high cost of petrol. And as Pasta mentioned, these developing nations are resource rich, but they have long been just colonized by the West and exploited. They are rich nations, rich countries that have been continuously just exploited and destabilized, and just continuously just been the areas where the West comes in and says, hey, you're gonna talk to us only. You're not allowed to talk to Russia or China. They continuously tell Africa that. But what's happened is that Africa and Russia have developed a relationship. Now, this relationship had long goes back to the era of the USSR, where they were working together to work on infrastructure and to get Africa out of the colonialism plagued by Britain, by the Dutch, by the French, and of course by the US. And this is what he says. He said, we have had a good relations with Africa since the Soviet times. For many years now, we have been restoring our presence. Africans are reciprocating. So we never taught them anything, never forced them to do anything. We always helped them to resolve their tasks and to lead their countries in the way they wanted. And we always had mutual visits. So even though Russia is not at this moment, doesn't have the most economic ties to Africa, that is on their agenda, is to develop that further. We know China's doing it, to criticism and to praise. China's doing it. The United States has been doing it. Europe's been doing it. Now Russia is cultivating these relationships, and they have been working a lot together in terms of, there's a lot of Pan-Africanism rising that's very anti-Western, anti-imperialist, anti-interventionist. And in that Pan-Africanism, there's been a push to develop more equitable relationships where, that's what Russia's interested in, and having a more, you get to lead your country and we get to lead ours.
Yeah. National sovereignty.
So there's that. Yes, which is an important word in this whole context.
And I just want to point out that the reason why they keep these countries destabilized is by design, so therefore they can extract the resources for pennies on the dollar. And the Congo is one of those great examples where when the majority of the lithium a big chunk of the lithium, I should say, comes out of the Congo, but yet it's extracted for pennies on the dollar. But it's destabilized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just going back to the EU in particular's impact, statistics say that 40% of the negative impact of sanctions is falling on the European Union. Americans are suffering less than 1% of it. So that's what it is. And he was just pointed that out, and that Ukrainians, of course, are also struggling, because this is destroying Ukraine intensely. Like, the country's never going to be the same again. And so here on this next one, this is the last part that I have of his speech. He talks about the talks, right? He says we used to engage in dialogue, and now we're not engaging in dialogue. And this is particularly where he was talking about not just with Ukraine, but with the West that's behind Ukraine, NATO, and their betrayal of breaking off the Minsk Accords and just going back onto their agreements, and the whole backing of NATO into this whole conflict. He said they're playing a very dangerous game, and they have not realized it themselves. However, there are many policymakers in Europe who are beginning to realize just that. We're going to talk about this in a minute. The second part of the section quickly is the fact that Zelensky and Ukraine are plagued by a lot of corruption and a lot of problems right now. And the sanctions aren't hurting Russia. Russia has other markets in the East. Russia has said as much. He said as much in this interview. You know, they got China, they got India, they got Pakistan. They're expanding. They just made a deal with Iran. Iran is making deals with Turkey. I mean, this whole situation is happening right now. It's developing and it's shifting. And I think a lot of these people in the EU are seeing winter is coming, and they're like, oh shit, maybe this wasn't such a good idea.
Okay.
So that's what's happening.
Okay. Let's get on to the tweet.
So slide 31, Russia's Gazprom confirmed, like I said, an agreement for $40 billion, the largest in Iran's oil history. And then President Raisi from Iran and Turkey's Erdogan announced an energy cooperation deal for $30 billion. So again, like I just said, these sanctions are failing, that these sanctions that they're trying to provide against Russia. And on top of that, Ukraine's been plagued by internal problems, particularly corruption. And this is kind of funny. And I did a thing on it, and I have another one coming too. Ukraine's messy internal politics rears its head as Zelensky sacks top officials. And so he's launching investigations into this sort of corruption, and he's calling them traitors. So President Vladimir Zelensky, this is from Politico, removed 2 top law enforcement officials Sunday. This may indicate the fraying of an unofficial agreement among political factions to pause politicking and present a unified front against invading Russian forces. This doesn't look good for the West. They're worried. They don't like it. They say this is the opposite of Ukraine attacking corruption, which is what they said they would do. A Western official close to Zelensky's administration expressed concern to Politico that the move appeared to go in the opposite direction of the EU's request for Kiev to crack down on corruption and increase the independence of its law enforcement agencies if it wants to become a member of the bloc. In fact, it was Ukraine's corruption for so long that, and the media talked about this pre-conflict, that stopped it from becoming a NATO member earlier, because they were so corrupt in the corruption or whatever index. And they go on, indeed, many political experts and anti-corruption activists viewed the removal of Ivan Bakanov, head of Ukraine's State Intelligence Service, CSBU, and Irina Venediktova, the country's prosecutor general, by presidential decree as Zelensky taking advantage of extraordinary wartime authority to consolidate his own power. So for the longest time, the West has been saying Russia's Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator. He's all powerful. They talk about Syria's Bashar al-Assad. any enemy, right, they consider an authoritarian, brutal dictator. Well, look at Zelensky. It doesn't look good for the West. It makes them look blatantly like hypocrites. Zelensky appears to be acting like an authoritarian. And this is what they said. This is Tatiana Shevchuk, a lawyer and activist in the Kiev-based Anti-Corruption Action Center, said, it's not a move to do the right thing. It's a move to gain more control over our top law enforcement bodies. So this is what the excuse that they're saying. And Zelensky said that the Ukrainian authorities registered 651 treason proceedings against officials in the country's top law enforcement agencies for allegedly collaborating with Russia or working against the state's goal. He wasn't clear whether Bakanov and Venikova were among those being investigated, but said that there was a probe underway. So that is essentially it. And since our guest is here, we can just skip the last part, but it's essentially just a video that I put up yesterday, just explaining essentially that Zelensky is unhappy that there are these traitors, and that Canada has gone back. A lot of just European countries and a lot of the West is easing restrictions on Russia because of the fact that winter is coming and the EU is clearly suffering, and it was of the return of the turbine to Germany, and they don't like that. And of course, there's this whole situation happening with Zelensky that is making it look like, okay, there's a lack of stability in Ukraine, and it's making the West look bad.
Okay. It's also, I think a lot of people are also kind of questioning whether, Zelensky, who is rumored to have a certain drug problem, if he's starting to freak out right now and lose complete control. A lot of videos surfacing out there of him, and he does not look like he's put together, fam. He looks like he's losing it, if you ask me. But I mean, this is who this guy always was. We always knew who Zelensky was a joke for quite some time, and he was a Kolomoisky guy put there by a Ukrainian oligarch who, funded the Azov battalion from the get-go. And this is stuff we knew. This is old stuff. So let's bring in our guest, who's got a lot of knowledge when it comes to the situation, who's been following. If you haven't, he's pretty active on Facebook, I think, of all the platforms. I haven't seen him too much moving around on Twitter, but he's back today without the echo, without the problem, still with that beautiful hair and that just glowing smile. Everybody, anti-war activist Don Dore is with us. How you doing, Don?
I'm doing all right, Pasta. How you guys doing?
Doing great,
good,
man. Doing great. So, did you want to say something before we just start jumping to the question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Fiona. Did I see it correctly? Were you covering the inauguration in Managua like a couple days ago?
No, that wasn't me. There was no inauguration in Managua. That was back in, I believe, January of this year.
That was an old. Okay, it
was an old one. Yeah.
Yeah. It went past on YouTube yesterday, and they had a ceremony this past weekend celebrating.
Yes.
In Managua, and so I saw the two things, and I did quick math and thought that's what happened. Thank you.
Yeah. It was the 43rd anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution, which is why there's a lot of people there right now. Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
A lot of people don't realize. They always say, well, why come Sandinistas are like some of the Sandinistas, his own Sandinistas are against them? I said, well, I think there was close to 9 Sandinista leaders, and one of them had to get control. So that would probably put a sour taste in the mouth of some other people who thought they should be the leader of Nicaragua and Managua. But let's get to Joe Biden first, and maybe we can kind of digress around. Don knows a lot of these things. He's great about them. But let's talk about the trip right now, because it is a little bit of old news, but I really wanted to get your opinion on it, whatnot. Biden just got back from his trip from Israel. Now, Joe has always said he's a Zionist. But whose policies are more detrimental to the Palestinians? Because a lot of people say, like, Donald Trump was the biggest, servant of Netanyahu in Israel. So whose policies are worse? Is it Biden, Trump, or are they equally bad and it really doesn't make a difference, Don?
Well, we can go back to Harry Truman, when the so-called state of Israel was carved out of Palestine. And in essence, the formalization of another European colony, this one in the Middle East. And all the way down. I think the only one that really expressed there was some skepticism by Eisenhower, some actual affirmative negative sentiment from President Kennedy, and we saw how that worked out. And from Johnson forward, the United States government has been more or less either a puppet or the puppeteer, depending on who you speak with in the relationship with the so-called State of Israel. We've got Barack Obama in the period between Election Day 2008 and January 20th, 2009. Israel started bombing the hell out of Gaza again. People who were calling him on some of the promises he had made during the campaign, that his answer was only one president at a time. And after that, just about everything that Israel wanted, they got. Trump, the things that he gave Israel were highly symbolic and not so material in nature compared to the previous and the present presidencies. Moving the capital, quote unquote, to Jerusalem, it was actually something that the United States government recognized but held in abeyance during Bill Clinton's time. The actual administration, some of the embassies, all of that stuff had long been moved there. The reason that people aren't even aware of what that means, the problem with that, of course, is that Jerusalem was part of Palestine even after the State of Israel and was recognized as being part of Palestine, and it's been colonized since, a large part of it, by the State of Israel. And so you're seeing Jerusalem shrink in the same way that the Palestinian state has shrunk over the years in favor of the Israeli state. What Trump did to formalize that really wasn't that material. It was more symbolic than anything else. So that was more a political move, I think, than a geostrategic move.
Yeah, the rhetoric, though, Don. There was a big sense of rhetoric out there that, you know what I'm saying? I made a joke before with my family. I said, don't tell me that Donald Trump can't bring people together. He's even bringing together Christians who used to be critical of the State of Israel. And now they're like, well, they're our greatest ally in the region. So, I mean, the rhetoric alone from Donald Trump was something special, no? Yes.
Well, he also did bring a lot of people together. He brought together the CIA, the FBI, the Democratic Party leadership, the Republican Party leadership, all of the major news media, the people on Wall Street, most of finance capital, and half of the population of the United States, thinking that he is, in essence, Adolf Hitler reincarnate. So he did a very good job of bringing those groups together.
Yeah, gotcha. Fam, did you want to ask?
I mean, that was his purpose. Yeah, I believe that was Trump's purpose. For me, one of the biggest things was when Biden arrived to Israel, and there was this obviously immediate shift to talking about how Iran is a nuclear threat, and just shifting away from this nuclear deal and just going right along with Israel, who is saying, no matter, we're going to take whatever action is necessary to protect the national security of Israel, the national security of the United States, and we're going to go after Iran, and they are not allowed to have nuclear weapons. Do you think this is any different than the foreign policy of the past, or do you think this is more of an escalation? Because Iran did respond with any action from the West is going to be met with resistance, with another action, right?
Well, yeah, look, and by the way, for clarity, what I just said about Trump's time, one material thing that he did do, two material things. One was the assassination of a key Iranian military official. Of course, he was the president when that happened, whether he decided to do it or not. And also, this is something that was material as well, the holding in abeyance of the release of some of the sanctions that were part of the JCPOA agreement. Now, Obama hadn't released them either, but Trump affirmatively came in on a platform of scrapping that agreement, and so there was no sanctions relief for Iran. And so that is a material thing with some very serious consequences for the people of Iran, by the way, and others. There's also, the Golan Heights. Again, that was more of a formalization of a de facto situation. But by the way, for a country that runs around the world talking about national sovereignty and right of self-determination, the capture of a piece of Syria and occupation of it by the state of Israel kind of gives the lie to that, as does, by the way, the United States occupation of pieces of Syria where they happen to have oil and the theft of that oil.
Seeing Biden arrive. I'm sorry, fam. Do you have a follow-up?
Sorry, did he? Okay. So do you think it's an escalation? It's a different. Yeah, the question I asked.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed it. Basically, listening to Biden, it sounded like war talk. We're looking at a war being conducted in Ukraine. We're looking at, with Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan and announcing it in advance, perhaps some military activity shaping up in the South China Sea and or elsewhere around China. Iran is in that path. Israel, of course, or whoever actually runs Israel, has been wanting to have at Iran for quite some time. The arrangements that Iran is making with China and Russia and the Belt and Road and all of that show that Iran has a very promising future as a major player in that region. And it is the largest nation and the most populous nation and the wealthiest nation by just about every measure in that region, and a natural leader for that. Israel sees it as the main rival. So do the Saudis. And so, it looks like it's not only an escalation, but war talk, like the kind of escalation that may end up not just with a strike by the Israeli air forces or whatever, but some sort of an actual war and an attempt at regime change. I bet that's on the agenda. It's on the agenda elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, speaking about a guy who will pull that trigger, that's Bibi, right? I don't know. I believe his name was Naftali Bennett, was the prime minister for about 6 minutes, and then he got ushered on out, and now we have somebody holding his place. But when Biden got off the plane, he was not supposed to be handshaking because, they wanted to avoid the MBS handshake that was going to be supposedly a political PR nightmare. Right. So they went to fist bumps. But unfortunately for the planners of Joe Biden, that Joe forgot the idea, and he went running to Bibi, got really close to him, shook his hand, got all, hey, I love you and whatnot. Is there any chance we see Bibi back in power? He seems like to be the consensus choice for any of the imperialists when it comes to the West.
And he's usually at the helm when there's another military action. Several of the most recent attacks, basically wars upon Gaza, took place with him in charge, and also a good part of Israel's participation in the war on Syria took place while he was prime minister. In addition to that, we've seen a whole series of regime change activity from London, with Bojo finally being pushed out. They've been after him for a long time, but the final moment happened the same day that Abe was assassinated in Japan, and this in coordination with what's going on in Sri Lanka. It seems also that there is some kind of a move afoot for regime change among those that are making war with Russia. I don't know if it means that there are some people in deep power and that are nervous about the policy being too reckless, or if they're upset with those people because they were putting a brake on an even more reckless policy that they have in mind. But I think you have to look at Israel as a key part of whatever that game is going to be, and bringing him back in. The instability that's been there already leaves a wide open field for that, and he would be the guy that is the bad cop in that scenario. So it is quite possible, I think.
Yeah.
So going back to Iran relations and Israel, you said that it would be possible for Israel, especially Netanyahu comes back, or if there is a very just Zionist and anti-Iran type of leader, which is the vast majority of them right now that can hold power. And there is a strike. Russia and Israel have a very interesting relationship. Putin is largely very forgiving of Israel. They have a very just economic type of relationship. They haven't gone after Israel. Russia hasn't, when it comes to a lot of the attacks they've done it a few times, but it's very much just like pacified after the fact. If something is said against Israel, then it's like, then it's just kind of like retracted. If not retracted, it's softened by Russia, because it seems like Russia has tried to play peacemaker in the region. Now, Russia has a very strong relationship with Iran. We just talked about how they have made a deal for $40 billion. And of course, you have Syria involved in this whole situation, where they're working with Syria to maintain Syria's sovereignty, but also not allow the takeover of terrorists of these that are in the region. Do you think that Israel is still overwhelmingly loyal to the United States, or do you think there's a possibility that perhaps they try to continue playing both sides? It seems to me that Russia is also going to have to make a decision, because if there is a conflict between Iran and Israel, it seems to me that the relationship with Iran at this moment is much stronger.
You know, I mean, it's a very complex situation around all of that. Russia, like China, you know, there are a lot of people that look at politics as if it's a religion almost, and they look for certain types of like ideological orthodoxy in the behavior and the pronouncements and the diplomacy of nation states that sort of remind one of the Cold War period, where you had a Marxist ideology that many elevated to, you know, the level of religion and metaphysical way, and the same for the free enterprise system, quote unquote, registered trademark. In fact, you know, all state actors or power actors using state and other forms pursue their self-interest as they perceive them, and they try to align the acts that they feel they must take with rhetoric to help position it for people that are looking at it in this other way. Russia is very realistic. They prefer collaboration to confrontation. They prefer peace to war. They understand that this is the best environment for business for everyone. It's the best environment for the growth of their own economy and their society and the actualization of the goals of the people in it. China is the same way. Their approach is not to insist on ideological orthodoxy with the people they do business with. They do business with whoever will do business with them that finds a mutually beneficial advantage. And so looking at the dynamics in the Middle East, for example, we have multiple regional poles, Iran, Iraq, by the way, as compromised as it is. It's got its own center. It is its own center of power. Egypt, by the way, Turkey, by the way, and also Israel, looking at it as a legitimate state, para la momenta. As these things move in three dimensions, in essence, Russia is looking to try to have good relations with all of them. There are people who look at Israel as illegitimate, and anything that Russia does that isn't an outright condemnation or an attempt to undo the colonial situation there, somehow they're just as evil as the United States, and so that's that. That's really not how the world works. And so Russia has a really difficult task ahead of it, trying to work through the tangled contradictions that have been created by imperialism, by the British, French, and the United States over the years. I think they're trying to actually do that. It's going to be difficult to find local partners, to use Lavrov's language, inside the state of Israel, but I don't think it's impossible, because if Israel is going to continue as a state and not as radioactive cinders, or as some battlefield, approaching some biblical myth, then that path is what has to be followed. There is not going to be a conquest of Iran by Israel, of Turkey, of all of that. Whoever holds those fantasies has to recognize, in fact, that they are fantasies. And I assume some larger players And I place the United States, certainly Langley and the Pentagon in that category, will constrain it. Hopefully it's without a whole bunch of mushrooms sprouting in the area.
It's crazy too. You know, as we were talking about this specific thing right here, I just get so bewildered, I guess is the word. I just can't believe the way the people in the States just take the pudding and the bait when they start saying, oh, Putin's an evil guy. He's trying to expand the old USSR. And I remember, you know, I see, you know, Putin going to Israel and, you know, how he's talking with them. And even when they have the coordinated attacks within Syria, the way they warn each other to make sure that there's no, you know, casualties amongst Russia and Israel. And even the classic time where you see Putin get up to MBS and they kind of hit high fives and they pull each other like close to in. So that's why I've always admired Putin and what he's done. But let me just digress to this other question, because you said something about the biblical part. And this is my last question about Israel. Fan might have a few more, but Don, asking personally, how do you try to reason with a bunch of pro-Zionists from the States that say that Jews have always been oppressed and they have a right to the state of Israel, when, you know, it's really hard to even say, well, listen, the Jewish people who are running Israel right now are not even Sephardic Jews from that area. They're Ashkenazis from Europe. You know, how do you reason with people and try to get them across to them to say, hey, what Israel's doing here is not really a good thing?
Well, you know, I mean, that, of course, assumes that it is possible to convince people of something that they don't want to be convinced of. And you have to look at the basis of their belief, you know, if this is like some sort of cult mindset or something, as opposed to something they reasoned their way to with faulty data, then it's really pointless. You know, the reality of the situation is that the state of Israel is a European colony on the territory of Palestine. It was imposed in the 1940s after a project that ran maybe back to the late 19th century, certainly the early 20th century. It involved genocide. It involved the forced removal and driving of people from their homes, torching of their villages and towns and cities, a changing of the map, a realignment of the you know, local power situation around it, several wars, and the creation of additional contradictions among the neighbors. You know, the whole thing. We almost had a unitary state, for example. We did for a moment of Egypt and Iraq and Syria, for example, during the time of Nasser. Israel was a foil to that. And we've almost had a couple of serious wars in the Middle East that we didn't have that also revolved around Israel. And it's quite clear, if you really look at it, that Israel has been a factor, certainly, in each of the wars that the United States has had, either as a launching pad, an outpost for, you know, listening, a place to train, you know, jihadis and others, and to provide support services like hospital, et cetera. So, you know, it's really hard to imagine a solution to that problem and convincing someone, basically, look, your belief either that somehow the European Jews were entitled to Palestine because Germans and Ukrainians, in essence, murdered a few million of them. If you're going to apply that logic, let's apply it around the world. And if you're going to hang, you know, your argument on the fact that 2,000 years ago, the alleged ancestors of these people were driven out, well, then let's have a conversation with the Sioux and the Iroquois and people across the Western Hemisphere, Australia, all over the world. Again, the short answer, if people are open to a discussion, then you give them the history of it and see what facts are missing from their narrative, and they will process that and come to reality. But it appears that that's not the case. This is something that's driven by ideology. It's a cult mindset. And it takes place in the United States, by the way. There was a study that was released last week, yet again. You have something like 53% of the adult population in the United States reads at a fourth grade level or less. So their understanding of the complexities of foreign policy, geopolitics, what's in the news, et cetera, assuming that those things were honestly taught and reported, is going to be compromised severely from the outset.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Don.
I guess for me, I'm going to shift just asking one Saudi Arabia question. Saudi Arabia is obviously not a democratic state. Is what they're doing to Yemen has been a crime against humanity. We know this, but Saudi Arabia has not flat out gone after Russia. They've been sort of on the fence. Putin's been, of course, in communication, as we have just mentioned. Where does Saudi Arabia come in? This visit by Joe Biden seemed like a visit to reiterate and reassess where the United States is with their supposed biggest allies in the region, being Israel and Saudi Arabia. And with the complex relationship that we just talked about, with Russia, Iran, Israel, Syria, Turkey, all of that, where does Saudi Arabia fall when they have been working with Russia and have even talked about oil and this economic relationship, when Joe Biden's coming in and trying to say, hey, are we still good? Are we still friends?
Well, I mean, you have the public relations problem, first of all, where Biden was running and saying, they're pariah. I'm going to ban them from the, family of nations, whatever. And then going over, hat in hand, looking for some kind of oil relief, which, by the way, was, reminiscent of the, recent episode in Venezuela as well, after the United States, since at least 2002, with the attempted coup then, has been trying to stage a coup d'etat, murder the president of Venezuela, whatever. Maybe they did murder the predecessor to Maduro, Hugo Chavez. I don't know, but, that recognizing, some guy who works at Burger King or whatever as the actual president, and then going hat in hand saying, can we have some oil? The situation that Russia is looking at in the Middle East, that all of the oil-producing nations are looking at, is the clear rise of a multipolar world, which means that if I'm a major oil producer, for example, my relationship to the United States as a colonial vassal is not necessarily a permanent one. And if there's going to be a shift in the basically the power relations internationally, certainly I should be looking side to side with the other major oil producers, and not just maintaining the existing cartel that exists, but firming it up and turning it into a serious instrument of global power. And consequently, that would mean standing with Russia in this particular instance, where the United States and Europe is attempting to injure Russia by shunning its oil products, and they're looking to buy them from somewhere else. It is essentially, Biden went there to ask Saudi Arabia to scab on OPEC. And Saudi Arabia said, no, thank you.
Yeah. Do you think there's a chance, though, that being the fact, since that Biden was close with the old regime in the kingdom, and he'd never talked to MBS before this, he never made a phone call, nothing whatsoever. And if anybody who knows the situations knows that Biden was close to the old regime, do you think that this was held over MBS's head of sorts to say, hey, man, you should really consider playing ball here, because if not, we might overthrow you and try to put the old regime back in play?
Well, see, this is one of the points of distinction between the old empire and, let's say, the BRICS or the ascendant multipolar world with, China as the primary economic force and Russia as the geostrategic military force, the geostrategic force in general. The United States has those kinds of conversations and bumps people off from time to time. Russia and China come to a country and say, look, you guys run your country the way you want. You have oil. We want to do business. For someone like MBS, that's who I want for an ally, not somebody I'm going to side with the United States today. And then next Tuesday, if they don't like what I had for breakfast or whatever, the CIA takes me out with an exploding cigar or whatever, and my cousin or my father-in-law ends up as the head of state. I think that we're at a point where people are seeing the difference between the two models, the one that's evolving and the one that is hopefully declining, it appears to be declining. And they're choosing, they're voting with their feet, so to speak, choosing the new model that allows them national sovereignty, dignity, and self-determination. I think that this is even something that the Saudis will get. The question of Saudi government is one for the people of Saudi Arabia to deal with, or Arabia, if you want to go that far, not for Langley. And I think even MBS would agree with that.
I think MBS is actually, and I don't know, I've never been to Saudi Arabia, but it seems with some of the policies that is actually more women's rights under MBS, that he's less in line with the clerks there. I don't know. That's what I've heard. So, I mean, I don't want to try to put a positive on a guy like MBS, but that's something I have heard. So sorry, fam.
Yeah, I'm not taking a judgment on it. I'm just, I'm doing an analysis basically of what I think is going to happen and trying to, as ironic as it sounds, you take a lesson from Robert McNamara on empathy. In Fog of War, he says, but one of the most important things to do is to try to see through the eyes of each of the players involved to understand things. And honestly, that at this moment in history, to have the U.S. come in and say, do what we're telling you or else, while there is this other alliance being presented that holds like an instrument of power, like a monopoly on oil as a possibility, it doesn't seem like it's a difficult choice for them to make.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go on to Ukraine for sake of time. And I just want to mention ask you, a lot of people were always trying to figure out if Putin was justified in the invasion of Ukraine. If there was anything else that could have been done at that point. He was being asked by the people in the Donbass region to come in for a while since, the 2014 Maidan coup, and you could say things began in the 2008 Orange Revolution. So you can go back to all of that. But now with this recent interview that Sergey Lavrov gave to Margarita from RT, he was talking about the geographical strategy changing from what was initially said, which was the fact that this was a military intervention. We're going to go in and we're going to denazify Ukraine. And we're also going to free and focus on the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic. And that's it. Well, he's saying now they're going to go further into Kherson and other parts of the region of South and East Ukraine. Is this dangerous to do this, or is this something that Russia could be justified in doing based on the fact that they need to secure a buffer zone and also they don't trust the word of NATO and the West from continuing to interfere and encroach towards Russia?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to. Is it possible to put that map back up of Ukraine that you had with the blue, red, and whatever?
Sure, it is. We'll get to it.
Yeah,
I'd like to illustrate something with it.
Slide 26.
Yeah. Okay, so along the top part of the green there, you have Belarus and Russia. That's where the border is. It's also along where the blue is, but this is the blue is now or will be most likely under control of either Russia or the Russians that live in Ukraine, self-determination. In other words, not hostile to Russia. The United States started shipping in some weapons that fire rockets far enough that the Russians had said, these can reach us. They said, well, we're not going to give them the long-range rockets. We're going to give them the short and middle-range ones. They won't be able to reach the border. And so what the Ukrainians did, of course, was drive closer to the border and start firing at Russian cities. One has to imagine how the United States government would treat, say, a Russian coup in Mexico and then a civil war in Mexico where Americans in California, Baja, Texas were under siege by Russian proxies. And then that these Russian proxies started firing Russian-made weapons that the Russians trained them to use into San Antonio and San Diego, et cetera. You would have thermonuclear war for 7 faster than you could say Alex. That's the analogy to the situation here. There's a couple of pieces of calculus that I think people are not really giving enough weight to, and they rest on really 2 fundamental questions. We know that Russia has a large and accurate and effective strategic nuclear force, and we know that its purpose is and has always been, as a matter of fact, entirely defensive, to discourage the West from invading their homeland and repeating what they suffered during World War II, which was just about 30 million casualties from Hitler's invasion. We have to ask a question, and I don't know if we're going to know the answer until we finally see it play out sometime soon or in 20 years. Will they actually use those weapons in order to preserve the Russian state? Because that question is on the agenda now. NATO they have proxies that are talking about how Russia needs to be broken up. The State Department itself now is sponsoring seminars with groups of dissident groups from inside the Russian Federation or their long lost cousins in Canada and the United States, on the premise that Russia is actually an empire and not a nation state that's comprised of conquered nations, and it needs to be decolonized and split into those constituent nations. Now, this is an intolerable situation for any nation state to suffer, particularly when the party that's making this declaration is conducting a war on your borders both with proxies and with mercenaries, and with, by the way, strategic weapons installed in places that can take out your leadership in 6 to 8 minutes. So the problem that I'm seeing here is Russia going to allow a takedown of itself, because they seem hell-bent on doing it? Biden himself has said it a number of times. He's walked it back, but the intent is regime change inside Russia. Will Russia defend itself with nuclear weapons in order to prevent the takedown of the government? And you have to ask that question in the context of this. This happened in 1991, and the people in Russia that are over the age of 35 or 40 remember the 90s. And so politically, I don't think it's viable for anyone in Russia to allow the state to collapse. And so I think that whoever is going to be making policy may end up facing this as a consequence of what NATO is doing. If they're going to be fighting in Ukraine, any part of Ukraine, that close, it's going to make that question come into much sharper relief, and it's going to make the decision-making time, put it on a much shorter leash. And so I think we have to consider that question in the context I just laid out.
Don, one of the craziest things I remember one of our presidents said was Donald Trump, when he said, I don't know why in Iraq we didn't take the oil. We should have took the oil. And then when he had the chance in Syria, he bragged about it. We took the oil, so ISIS can't get a hold of it, was his excuse. It seems like Vladimir Putin's being a little bit more vocal about what's going on as far as the oil in Syria, or the fact that Washington can't keep their grubby hands off it. Can you provide a little context to that and what's actually going on? And do you think this time around, because it seems like the Russian Federation, since Biden got in office, even before this whole Ukraine thing started, remember that was one of the first things we heard Ned Price and Sullivan talk about, whatnot. They had the jockeying in the Black Sea. Lavrov and Putin both seem to have this different attitude, like, this is in 2014, we're not going to stop. And now being vocal even more about what's going on in Syria. Give us a little context of what's going on and what's going to happen over there in Syria with Washington constantly stealing the oil.
All right, well, we've got a timeline there. to 2011. Really, I guess you want to go to 2007 when they started to excite trouble in Georgia and a few places in the southern flank of the Russian Federation. 2011, the invasion of Libya and the conquest of Libya, the murder of Gaddafi, the beginning of this, the takedown in 2010 of Cote d'Ivoire by the French and the United States, really. And the fight in Libya was over because we had resolutions 1970, 1973 at the UN Security Council. Although they imposed a no-fly zone and sanctions on Libya's government, the U.S. construed them to authorize a bombing campaign that lasted from, March 20th until October 20th. A massive one, by the way, like 12 hours a day over every city. That resulted in the overrunning of the country by, the U.S.-trained jihadis that are still in power there in one fashion or another. They tried the same scenario in Syria, like a couple of weeks behind Libya, if that. I don't recall the exact dates, but it was slightly behind Libya. And China and Russia both said, oh, no, we see this game coming. And so they vetoed those resolutions. And consequently, there was never any grant of UN Security Council sanction to an aerial campaign over Syria. Consequently, the Syrian government was able to hold off the ground attack that came in with the same, more or less the same configuration of forces, which were also redeployed from Libya once that was achieved to Syria. At some point, the Syrian government invited the Russian government in to lend them military assistance. The Russian government supplemented the Syrian Air Force and provided air defenses and provided satellite surveillance, training, equipment, and they basically helped the Syrian government turn it around. The U.S. stepped up. There were, at a time during the Obama administration, up until, say, January 20th of 2017, when Trump was inaugurated, you had competing armies on the ground backed by the United States in Syria, the Pentagon's jihadi army, CIA's jihadi army. They were shooting at each other with all of the bullets paid for by us, by the way. There was every kind of criminal activity going on the ground in the hands of them. You had also Turkey had people there. The Kurds had people there. The Israelis had people there, and the Israelis were providing like MASH and other medical emergency services to the fighters, the jihadi fighters. That's a pretty interesting picture if it were actually on TV. So that thing has been grinding since 2011. There are millions of refugees, thousands and thousands of deaths. Through that, first there was a constitution that was adopted, crafted by the people along the lines of the Venezuelan constitutional process, crafted by them in 2011, won an overwhelming approval in a referendum in 2011 that involved about 90% of the population, both in and outside the country, with an 85 or 88% approval rate. Shortly thereafter, Bashar al-Assad was elected president by a similar margin. That has happened twice since then. And this is including the vote from people who are outside of Syria in places like the United States, Canada, Europe, et cetera. And the U.S. has nevertheless continued to conduct a war there. Now, when Trump, was president, Trump turned the emphasis, at least publicly and also militarily, of the U.S. from acquiring territory on behalf of the jihadis to declaring war on ISIS, which they perceived as being a threat to the United States, and they wanted to tamp it down. Well, at that point in time, the tide turned in a major way towards the Syrian government, and the U.S. snatched just a couple of areas that happened to be, by coincidence, oil-rich areas, and they still hold those areas now.
Yeah. Yeah, and they still won't give up the oil, it seems.
This is what President Putin was talking about. He said, give it back. You don't belong in that country. You want to talk about an illegal occupation, by the way. The Syrian government not only did not invite the United States government in, they told them 1 million times to get the hell out.
Yeah.
And the United States has set up camp. It's analogous to what the U.S. did in Ukraine, only they didn't do it by proxy by sending Biden's son over to sit on the board of a energy company that's stealing the country's resources. They went in and did a conventional military occupation and started pumping the oil.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And man, that's the good old US of A. You got anything else for Don Dore, fam?
No, that's it, fam. Don,
thank you so much for joining us. I hope you come back and join us again. I told you the other day, I waited too long. I'm glad you reached out, and I love what you got to say. I love following your work. Tell everybody where they can find, follow, and help support your work. Okay. You correctly noted Facebook. I'm active there. It's Don Dore. You can see the little tag down here. And also at vk.com, which is a similar Facebook that is not subject to the controls by U.S. Intel and Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. Also on Twitter, Don Dore, at Don Dore, spelled this way, one word. And on YouTube, youtube.com/Don Dore. I've got hundreds of videos up there going back 15, 20 years. Have you been on Crosstalk lately? Last week or the week before, I think. Yes. Oh, well, I got to go see that episode then. Definitely. That's why I saw you years ago over there, Don, and I'm so happy you joined us today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I'm fans of both of you, by the way. Aw, thank you, Don.
We love you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Totally love you back. Totally. Don Dore, ladies and gentlemen. He's awesome. Love him.
Yes.
Thank you, Don. Fam, is that good for today?
Thank you. Yeah, you want to leave the other section for Friday?
Yeah, it's pretty in depth and whatnot. We can pick it up on Friday, and I might just do a little kind of rant and put it out there Thursday, and then we can talk about it more maybe on Friday. But Friday we do have Garland Nixon coming on the show, and there's a lot of things I want to talk about. Garland, fam, I want to get myself in trouble on Friday.
Okay. All right. Sounds good then, guys.
Let me read some Super Rays. Yeah. What we have going right here. I think I read most of them, fam. I read El Brillante, not Brillante, Brillante. Thank you so much for the Super Ray contribution. Matt Holloway, great interview with Don Dore. Super Seamster Sewing Show, Bakersfield, California. Congratulations. Fiorella. Oz, what do you got over there for us before we get on out? Handsome. Oz. With the overalls.
No,
you got something for us, baby?
No, I just I think that was a great interview with Don, and looking forward to Friday with Garland Nixon. You guys nailed it today. Pasta, comb your hair and call your mom. Okay.
I'm going to comb my hair and call my mom. Thank you, Oz. Oz on the ones and twos for Pasta Jardula.
Fiorella.
Combo out.
Combo out. I need sleep.
Get some. Go get some.
I can't. I have to finish a script and then